No, what you said was interesting. Is it's such a complex problem. It's essentially a sociological problem. It's human behavior problem, and modeling that is difficult. It reminds me
Yeah.
when we were
Welcome to
trying
the
to
deep chat.
apply Bayesian belief networks to human intelligence problems. Like, is this thing going to happen? But there were so many variables that were human based and not
Right.
they were opinions. The nice thing about a Bayesian belief network is it's based on probabilities, and you try to adjust those based on some input data.
Well, and you incorporate the prior information you have and update when new information's available.
Right.
That's really the beauty of them.
So it turns out those were really good for things like looking at the plume of a rocket to determine what type of rocket it was.
Okay, interesting. I wouldn't have predicted that, but it makes sense.
All right. Okay. But they're not so good at other problems like, I got to be careful here. Determining whether or not someone is going to go to the grocery store that day.
Makes sense, sure. Well, it depends on what variables you have.
That actually might not be the best example, I should say.
No, it is good in a way because the average person, like if your local grocery store was trying to figure out, is Brad going to come to the grocery store today? I mean, if you're like someone who has this rigid schedule of like every second Thursday you come, like they would know that. But I think very few people have such a routine. The grocery store is kind of a random visit. So it's what do you know about them? If they booked an appointment, you have a pretty high certainty they're going to come. So it's can the network capture... The network's only as good as your intelligence, I guess, is the way to put it. And maybe intelligence is the right word for why you were being so cagey.
Yeah, maybe. But yes, it is only as good as your intelligence. And that is always the problem is humans are still really good at or maybe they're not good at it, but we trust our gut more. Machines don't have the concept of a gut.
True.
I guess you could argue that they do in the sense that they spit out garbage, and that's them trusting their gut based on what they know, right?
It's getting down to the poetics, actually. Like, I could write a paper that says the machine has a gut, but no, the modern concept of machine learning doesn't have anything like the human's notion of a gut. The equivalent is the machine just picks something at random.
Yeah, but isn't a machine's notion of a gut similar to a human's in the sense that what we call our gut is just our brain going, I don't fucking know, so here's an answer.
But your brain also concocts a story at the same time. It's like, well, I don't know, it worked for this other guy I knew, let's just give it a shot.
Right. So this reminds me of first time someone goes on a backcountry ski adventure, they're very cautious. They go up the hill, they look, they've done the avalanche training, go, okay, I'm good, I'm safe here. I'm 100% certain I'm safe. I'm going to go down and no avalanche. That time, no avalanche. Second time they go, they look, they go, okay, no avalanche. Third time, no avalanche. Fourth time, no avalanche. And then fifth time, they're like, okay, this one looks good, and it didn't happen last time, but there's that little piece right there. And I'm a little bit worried about it, but I think we're good. And they go down and no avalanche. And this happens 100 times.
Until they die.
Well, on the 105th time, they've gotten so good at kind of going, well, it didn't happen last time, so I'm going to push 5% further. It didn't happen the time before, I'm going to push 5%, 5%. And eventually they push it too far because they've ceased to be as cautious.
Well, this also assumes that they don't have the right sensors to detect the oncoming avalanche. They don't see the leading indicators. Like it's I don't think an avalanche is a binary event, although I could be mistaken. It's got to be at one of those 5% increments. You're like, whoa, shouldn't have done that.
Yep. A part of it is trusting your gut, and your gut can be tricked by prior information that may be just based on luck.
Yes, exactly.
So I guess what I'm saying here is a machine does something similar in the sense that it can spit out an answer because it was trained poorly, and it's trusting that's the equivalent of the gut is poor training, right?
In a manner of speaking, yeah. I mean, to me, the gut has that storytelling component to it. You know, like you've convinced yourself of it. Maybe even incorrectly convinced yourself. So you've made a false inference. Modern machine learning won't make a false inference. It will fail to make an inference that could have been there.
Oh, so it will say, we don't know, or it will say...
You're more likely to get random behavior because your brain is going the extra mile. It's saying, in lieu of any information, I'm going to tell myself a story about why I should do X. But the machine says, in lieu of information, I flip a coin every time.
Right, but isn't telling a story doesn't it amount to flipping a coin?
It could be worse.
Right, because that story could lead you down the bad path every single time.
Yeah, like to your example, if you have a history of luckily avoiding risk when actually you were on the precipice of risk every time, that's going to catch up with you eventually. But it seems to you locally rational to take more risk.
Because the story you told yourself was
Invincible.
that I'm invincible or that there is no risk.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting. So the machine is just more likely to flip a coin than to tell a story, is what you're saying. And in that flipping of the coin, you'll get more random. Whereas telling a story is more of like a fixed, go down the same path because that story tells you you can go down that path.
Yeah, it's a very different cognitive thing. It's something machines don't really do that we do.
Interesting. So are we ever going to give machines a gut?
If they develop one, I think it'll be an emergent phenomenon, that it's just something that is convenient to have or to sort of imbue in the learning process. But
there's no utility to it, right? So why?
Well, that's the question. Yeah, right. That's the fundamental question. I'm not willing to rule that out. It seems irrational from like a very pure textbook game theoretical kind of point of view. But could that as a heuristic benefit you greatly in the real world? Like, do you know what pareidolia is?
No.
It's the likelihood for your eyes to see something that isn't there. And the classic example of why we have this, like you see a shadow and you think it's a person. The classic example of why we do this is because wind back 100,000 years, human beings running around on the savannah, if you think you see a tiger in the reeds and you run, you're safe whether there's a tiger there or not. If you fail to see the tiger and you think it's just the reeds blowing, you're going to get eaten. So evolution maybe gave us this quality.
Well, that's interesting because my daughter, who's 6, will see things in the house that scare her, right?
Sure.
That's a ghost, or that's this, or that's that. And that's partially the undeveloped brain not recognizing the patterns that constitute a ghost or whatnot.
Over-recognizing, yeah.
Right. It's, their brains, that's the way it is. Their brains are firing and they're not pruned. The neurons aren't pruned enough yet. So
pattern recognition machines.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Pareidolia. Interesting concept. So
I brought that in from the point of view of like ML. Will ML have pareidolia as we get more and more advanced computer vision systems? I don't know. It seems like they don't have that evolutionary selective pressure, if in fact that's why we do that. Maybe that's just a convenient story evolutionary people tell, and there's a neurological explanation for pareidolia, in which case it's beneficial to machines to have it. I don't know.
Couldn't pareidolia just be based on incomplete information? Because usually when I see this happen, it's because it's caught out of the corner of your eye, or it's a glance, or it's quick, and you haven't really had enough data to push through the machine to determine whether or not it's true. So it's just inaccurate in that sense.
Well, your brain did two things. One is it said, here's a situation in which I think I need to fill in the blanks. And maybe a computer system would do the same. And then in filling in the blanks, it chose to do them in the scariest way.
Right. So here's a way I could see computer systems evolving to have this. If you do millions of simulations in a combat simulator, eventually it's going to have to start recognizing threats. And it's going to over-recognize at some point, probably over-recognize a threat. And then it's going to correct to have some kind of threshold where it goes, well, I got it wrong that one time, but now this time I got it right. And somewhere there's a window where there's a threshold of it's worth it to overcorrect.
Most likely. These are kind of deep questions in a way. There isn't a whole lot of debate in the AI and machine learning community along these lines, but I think we'll get into a lot of debate as these terms become more and more something we can actually say the machines might have.
Interesting. I think we're going to have to unpack this one more.
We're looking forward to that.